Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a drama / comedy from Slovakia. This is also a co-production with Czech Republic, Slovak language English subs, released in the year 2016, directed by Jan Rebak, and this film is called The Teacher. So The Teacher is set in the early 80s Czechoslovakia under communist rule. You've got this teacher who's part of a communist party who rules with an iron fist because all those around her are scared to actually make her unhappy because of the repercussions, because of her connections. So even the headmistress is very worried, and so this woman, this teacher is going to actually manipulate her power, manipulate the vulnerable people underneath her by asking her students what the parents do for a living. And whatever the parents do for a living, she's going to actually utilise for herself. And so basically, whether it's a builder or a cleaner, she's going to get something out of it, take that to her advantage for free. And in return, she's going to give the students a good grade. But if any of these parents should refuse what she's proposing, she's going to fail the students. So it's very unfair, and it causes a lot of concern amongst the parents, so much so that they decide to hold this secret parents meeting hosted by the headmistress in order to try and sign a petition to get this teacher out of here. But unfortunately, some of the parents are actually benefiting from what this woman is doing, and their kids are actually succeeding in school, so they're not going to sign it. So they all start bickering between each other, and it really complicates matters to a point where the future of the youth is put under great pressure. So what happens at that point on is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Teacher. I didn't really have any expectations coming into this movie, but the main reason I wanted to watch it is that it's a movie that depicts communism. It's a movie that depicts all the shortcomings of communism, and in theory how great it is, but in reality how destructive it can be. When European films depict this, especially countries that were actually under this rule, I just think it's very riveting cinema. You've got plenty of other films that are reviewed that take place in this same time period, and it's a movie that is so much more than just face value. These are movies that have very strong symbolism. And so coming into The Teacher, I was hoping that it was going to be a very similar experience to so many experiences that I've had, and the biggest surprise to The Teacher was it was so much better than I expected it to be. I think this is one of the most riveting experiences I've had in a very long time, for the simple fact that the script is absolutely brilliant. The script not only allows the viewer to maintain that level of interest, but it allows these characters to blossom into such a 3D dimension that you cannot take your eyes away from them. And the way that this movie starts to pan out, I thought was very entertaining, very dark, and also very funny. And so there's a lot of conflicting emotions in this movie that make it an overall rewarding experience. And so to start off with, the cinematography, once again very European. This is a movie that is set in communism, the communist era, and it actually feels like a communist sort of era as far as the visuals are concerned. Very devoid of vibrant colouring, so it almost feels very bland, and almost feels that everyone is wrapped in a blanket of fear, and that the people, the higher powers, are actually manipulating all the vulnerabilities in this world. And so The Teacher, played brilliantly by Susanna Mareri, on the outside very sweet and innocent, but on the inside a very sinister person. And this is basically how communism was. And so this woman is actually going to manipulate everyone below her, and it shows you the abuse of power, and how this woman had no regard for anyone but herself, and that she was going to get the benefit, and if someone stood in her way, it didn't matter whether it was a very young student, she was going to ruin their lives. And so it was almost felt like the compassion was drawn out of her. It almost felt like she had no decency, and almost felt like she was a villain. Although she wasn't a traditional villain, although she wasn't killing people, she was killing people's futures. So suddenly I thought she was a very scary individual, and this is the reason why the movie gets you, is that everything is so subtle. It slowly creeps up on you to a point where you actually start to think about things. Is that not only with communism, but your very powerful people out there will use their power in order to cloud people's judgments, in order to rule with that iron fist and to get what they want. And so when she starts manipulating these parents, I thought, okay, some of it was funny, some of it was deeply disturbing, and it's a very dark sort of undertone that the movie has. A very melancholic undertone, because these vulnerable people deserve so much more. But it's the corruption. Basically, if you can manipulate someone and prey upon their vulnerabilities in order to get greater gain for yourself, some people will do this. And so that does, you have to lack a lot of compassion for that. And unfortunately, I think this teacher, not only was she this villain, sort of villain-like character, she was also a victim of her circumstances, that she was facing a very tough time as well. And unfortunately, in tough times, sometimes you have to push someone under the bus in order to get ahead. And so you kind of, like, as I said, very conflicting emotions, is that you hate what this teacher is doing, but unfortunately with her character you start to think, okay, why is she doing this? And the questions as to why they're doing it is because because of the harsh conditions that everybody is living in. So it's a very subtle as far as the deadpan humour is concerned. I thought it was very funny in some places, but it's the script and the characters that just keep you absorbed on the screen. This is a movie that doesn't have any action, doesn't have any violence, but it just kept me glued. I didn't realise that time was going so fast, is because not only is the script very witty and the exchanges between each person very, very good, it was also, as I said, symbolising an era in history that was very interesting. And unfortunately, even by today's standards, even though communism has been wiped out in a lot of areas, it's still present. The ugly, sinister sort of tone to that is still present in a lot of people. So you've got fantastic performances from the supporting cast, but it's definitely Susanna Mareri who steals the show as the teacher. Just this woman who you can tell is just a really sinister sort of individual, but she has vulnerabilities herself, and so it's not a traditional villain. It's a villain, as I said, that is a product of how she was. Her husband died, so she has it very hard herself, and so there's a strong sense of pathetic quality in this character that really makes her very interesting as well. But the beauty of this film is that the other characters haven't been neglected. The other characters are just as interesting as each other, and so there's no filler, and there's no one in this film that feels as though they shouldn't be there. So I thought that was all fantastic. The continuity was great, and the way that these parents are starting to bicker between each other in order to try and stand up against the powers, it shows you what some vulnerable people would do in order to keep their good fortune, is that some people were actually benefiting and basically selling their souls to the devil in order for the greater good, and so they weren't prepared to sign this petition, even though deep down they knew what was right and wrong. But so basically, for personal gain, what will you do? Will you stand up and do what is right, or will you just go along with it just as long as you are benefiting from it? So it's something to think about. It's something very devastating. There's a very subtle devastation to the film that I thought just makes it very sad, but it all concludes into something that I thought was very, very rewarding, and it's a movie that I highly recommend. I really like this film. Unfortunately, though, the biggest problem to this movie is not a problem in the film itself, but in what you expect from it. Is that if you're expecting something of a traditional sort of a Hollywood movie or traditional comedy, you're going to be shortchanged. It's because this movie doesn't strike you on that level. This is a very, very European film. So if you don't like European movies and the different style that they have, you're not going to like this movie. On the outside, this movie is quite ugly. But underneath, if you can see the symbolism, basically this teacher is a symbolization of, the corruptive powers, and the classroom is the vulnerable state that the country was. If you can look past what you actually see, you can see such a deeper meaning to the teacher, and it's one that is incredibly satisfying. But as I said, if you have a short attention span, if you don't like films that have subtitles or rely on very strong scripts, then I would say stay away from that. That's the film's biggest problem. That is very, very European. But for me, that wasn't a problem at all, and it's the reason why I would say if you are a fan of European cinema, this is essential viewing. I'm going to give The Teacher 4.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.